Hello, 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 hello. It's another guitar, it's another SG. It's a 400, SG 400. And it's a, I was going to say Yamaha, it's not a Yamaha, it's an Epiphone. Pingy. Let's just do this with the tuner a minute, because I want to just check something out for a minute. So we have this. Chris just dropped this off today, and it's in for a setup, and lowering of the action. That's now in tune according to the tuner. We put it back together again and we have a listen. So here we have the neck pickup, middle, bridge. Open D. Classic problem, you see. Open G, perfectly in tune. Open G, perfectly in tune. Fret the G for an A, and it's sharp. And I actually can't hold it lightly enough so it stays in tune, otherwise it just won't play. So even making the slightest note, it's running sharp. That's because of the height of about a millimetre, or about 0.78 of a millimetre. So it's just a little tiny detail, and if you've got a musical ear, it'll drive you insane. You'll tune it, you'll get that out of it. You tune it, you get that, and you tune it again, you'll get that out of it. You find yourself back on your tuner, put it back in. Oh look, dead on E, dead on B, slightly sharp on G, G, D, A, E, right, perfectly in tune. Plug it back in, D. That note there will always send your open chord out of tune. Somewhere you don't play it, it'll sound okay, but it's supposed to be an F, sharp. Can't make an F without it going sharp. So you might think I'm exaggerating. I'm not. I'm just pointing out, by the way, the jack socket is falling apart on this guitar, so we need to sort that out as well. Yeah, you may think I'm exaggerating or kind of going a bit overboard, but so many perfectly good factory quality guitars come out in that condition. So, you know, what feels okay from the outset just actually has a first fret action that's so high, in inverted commas, so high enough to cause notes fretted by mostly the, you know, by any normal mortal to go sharp at the, when fretted near the first fret, and more so than anywhere else on the first fret. So the purpose, if it's not something you're aware of, and if you're trusting, if you like, you trust that the condition that comes out of the factory should be right, you wouldn't know. But this thing here is quite high. Now I don't usually bother to measure it because I kind of already know what I need to know about it. If I just take these off, I think this is one of these kind of hard plastic nuts as well. If we were kind of interested or bothered to check what the sort of gauge was, we got a 40 and a 30, that's 70 together. Oh yeah, that. Let's push those down flat. That's at least 80, or if not a little bit above. So my experience is that anything above 50 is going to lead to that problem, and actually quite a bit less than that. And if you ever want to know, I should have done this with an amp on, but you know when you play something like this, no, that won't work. When you put the strings on, if you ever want to know whether your nut is causing you problems in the tuning department, I don't mean yet in the both departments. If you want to know, first of all, if your notes, your open chords are playing sharp, play the open chord down there, and it doesn't sound great, and then get a capo, and this isn't even my best capo, and then we'll fret that. Now what you have to do then is retune it, which I, funnily enough, should have kept the thing, but let's just do it audibly. G sharp, D sharp, A sharp, and F. Right. Look. It's not, that's sharp because it's A sharp, but it's not ringing, or barely ringing sharp on the sharp button. So the secret is, if you've got a problem with your first fret action being too high and it's putting your strings, your notes down by the nut out of tune, even just so that they spoil the open chords, put a capo on, retune once you put the capo on, and perhaps with a better tuner than I just did there, but retune it and then play the same chord kind of as if you've lost a fret. Play the same open chord and you'll hear it, if you've got a problem, you'll hear it sound much cleaner, and it will feel easier to play too, because what you're doing is you're taking the high nut or the high first fret action out of the equation, and you're using the first fret as a 0 fret, which then sets by default the correct first fret action. If you were to measure this now on a standard, this is actually a little bit high still up here, but on a guitar with this action, what you'll find is this is about 0.3 of a mil, maybe 0.2, something like that. That'll turn out to be about 2. But actually, if we lowered this down even a little bit more, it'd be about 0.1. So your guitar with a capo on, with a pound for pound a lowish action down here, will play with about 0.1 of a millimetre gap. And what we've got here is about 0.9 over that G. That G is about 0.9. It's probably the highest on the whole set. If I was smart, I'd take a picture of it, but I haven't brought my camera. But it's, you know, a lot of people understand that. It's just surprising in the number of people who don't. And it's not something the manufacturer ever tells you, because it's in the manufacturer's interest really for you to think this is ready to go, because hey, it's a good brand, right? But they all come with this various different heights. Sometimes the nut is fractionally too tall in the slot, and the whole thing, you know, all of them are too high. And sometimes they're individually just not cut properly, so that the machine or whatever that cut them, it leaves one a little bit taller. So that on this, I can actually, if you put a you know, blade across here, you'd see them kind of rocking over the G, because the G's higher than all of them, and consequently the gap is bigger. So the G's going more out of tune than anything in that equation. So our job is to obviously take that down and get it to closer to as if it were capoed. And to do that, we'll cut down the nut slots. Or, in this case, we're going to remove it and put on a custom adjustable Tusq nut, which I'm more and more using on these 3 asides. We'll also lower the playing action overall. We'll also check the neck relief and see what we've got. Now this is running on 10s, and we're going to replace it with 10s. So just looking at this, this is nice and low. It's about 1/10 of a millimetre there, which I'm happy with. I'm not going to adjust it. What I will do now, if I'm happy with... some people think I'm very cavalier about this relief thing. You don't have to get precious about it, right? If you have no relief, you can have a flat neck and it will still play, but you may find that the strings hit the frets when you lower the action quite a bit, or if you hit it hard. So there's several variables in that, right? How low this is, how flat that is, how low it is at the nut, and how hard you hit it. That's 4 of them. To begin with, I like to start with about 0.1 to 0.2 of relief as measured by holding the first and last fret down and measuring the gap between the string and the fret. Now you can only have either no gap at all, in which case the chances are your neck is back bowed, in which case notes down here won't play at all. They'll choke because they'll be hitting the raised middle of the fingerboard. Or you can have some relief, which we have here, about 0.1 in this case, or you can have too much relief, in which case it'll be quite bowed and your action will feel quite high in the middle of the neck, even if it's low at both ends. The point is, all I would say to you is start with a little, that's all. Go for 0.1 or 0.2, see what it feels like, but don't be afraid to adjust it. And I say this time and time again, but the most important thing is that you learn for yourself what difference adjusting the truss rod produces, what effect it produces. Because if you don't, you'll never know, and it'll always be a mysterious thing, and you'll be constantly in the thrall of the dark art of the luthier or whatever. So, you know, just for fun, I'm going to do it right now, just to show you, just to make the point. So you take off your truss rod cover, if you never have before. And some people get cold sweats even doing this. I can hear a cricket started up outside occasionally, because they think it's warm again. End of August, and we're going to get a little bit of a mini heat wave over the weekend. So what I recommend is you get your thingy, whatever it's called, truss rod cover off. You choose your correct truss rod adjuster key. In this case it is the 4mm one, I think, Chinese standard. I'm using a screwdriver type thing. I don't know how well you can see that actually. I'm putting this in here. Now I'm going to do the crazy thing. I'm going to slack this right off. And what's it going to do for me? I'm going to put my check on now. Oh my god, we've got about 3/4 of a millimetre relief. Right, that's all it's done. And it will feel very different. Even if we now lower this action, which I'll just do casually, take this right down. This can go quite a long way down. Nice thing about an SG, I found, is that because the neck is so inherently flexible, and the reason for that is that the truss rod is all, the neck itself, fingerboard and the truss rod by definition, are all outside of the body mass so it's not it doesn't impede it. It doesn't stop it from. It doesn't prevent it having a nice smooth curve all the way across. Yeah. Right, low action up here. Oh no, high frets. It's a little bit excessive. That's only under 1 millimeter, but. What we're just doing is just getting a feel that even though I've got an incredibly low action down here, it's still quite high here, and it's got a lot of relief in the neck now, so it feels really high up here, and it feels like it gets kind of lightning up here, but huge high action here. And that's the consequence of slacking off the truss rod and allowing the string tension to pull the neck into more of a curve. Now, we just said we don't really want that much, so if you find a guitar with first fret, last fret, last fret, first fret, and you measure it halfway across and you think, wow, that's too much, you just get your 4mm hex key, put it in the end, make sure it's nicely fitted, and give it a turn. Right? And in fact, I'm going to, just for the joy of it, to show you can't break it, I'm going to do this up to a point where you can't play it. Right? So I've now reverted one of these, which is actually easier to turn. I say easier, it's a sort of relative concept when you come to hex key adjustments. Right, now I'm trying to put a bit of back bow in the neck. I'm not sure if I've got there yet, but I've certainly taken out, well, now this is way too flat, so now I can't possibly play this the way it is, so I'm going to just raise that up a bit. Now we've got nice low action here, very low here, put my fingers on first and last, and we've still got a tiny bit of relief, so I can push a tiny bit down and there's a gap. If I add a bit more tension to the truss rod adjuster, that usually happens. You don't have a lot of room when you've got the G and the D string in place, so you have to kind of waggle until you get a good bite, and then you keep going. Now you can see I'm putting quite a bit of heft into this, and I'm still not. I may just be getting it to the point of being at least flat, if not backbowed. Now you can hear the effect. See, it's struggling to play the low notes now. Hear them buzz? They're plenty high enough off the nut, so it's not a nut action problem. And they play when they're open because that's high, but as soon as I fret them, choking. Telltale sign of a backbowed neck. Plays open, doesn't play in the first half, but watch what happens in the second half. Plays. Chokes. So that is a slightly backbowed neck, easily cured, providing your truss rod actually works, easily cured by using your hex key, your 4mm Chinese friendly hex key, getting it in as good a position as you can, and just slacking off some of that. Now, there are various schools of thought about this truss rod business, saying some people insist that the truss rod will take a week to adjust, and they leave the guitar up and they don't do anything until they come back a week later. Some people absolutely poo-poo that, saying it happens instantaneously, more or less, or it doesn't happen at all. This is all out of tune now because I lowered the bridge and because I moved around the truss rod. Right, so we're hitting some bum notes, duff notes there. So that was just really by way of a little demo, so you can see that you can demonstrate for yourself the physical effects, the actual effects of what a backbowed neck starts to sound like when you run out of clearance here and notes here start to choke, and how easy it is to recover the relief you need, and then to end up checking quite quickly. And if you want to get the old what do you call it, feeler gauge out, like you see people like Dave in Dave's Fun World of Fun Stuff or whatever it's called. He's a great guy for, you know, he's got such a smooth technique when he comes to using his little thing. I find it really clumsy to do this, but he seems to do it effortlessly. But if you really want to measure it, right, hold it off and get your little thingy and go, oh yes. And now the bit I will challenge you to is, if you can see that move when it goes under without your shaky hands making everything shake, then who knows. But I would say that we've got barely a 0.1, maybe 0.15, which is pretty much where I want it. All right, so I'm not going to do any more adjustments. I hit it by chance, really. Good luck. So that was just by way of showing you a little bit. If it's something you're nervous about, and I'm not suggesting you are, you may be fully experienced, and apologies if it is an egg sucking thing, and I don't mean to patronise you, but if it's new to you, and if you are one of those people who get a bit scared off or frightened away by it, don't be. I heartily recommend you experiment for yourself to see A, what kind of feel you like, and B, how adjustments affect the guitar in a tangible and practical way. And I say this quite on a few videos, but I'll say it again. People make a mistake of thinking that you, when you have an action issue and people play, oh, it's too high or it's too high, they crank the truss rod and they think that's the primary method by which you adjust the action. It isn't. A change in the playing action of the guitar around its middle part of the neck is a consequence or a secondary effect of adjusting the truss rod. By that I mean your primary reason for adjusting the truss rod is first and foremost to give your strings the kind of room they need when you strike them, appropriate to, or in the context of what action you're setting here, and also your playing style and how hard you hit the frets. Okay, the fact is that when you make that adjustment with that in mind, you will also get a secondary effect, which is either an increase or a decrease in the height of the string action around the middle, more pronounced around the middle. But when you hear somebody saying, giving advice that if you've got a high action, then go and adjust your truss rod, it's not good advice. They'll probably argue you till they're blue in the face that they did adjust their truss rod, and yes, it increased the action. I'm not disputing that. It's a secondary effect. It's not how you improve the action on your guitar. How you improve the action is by raising and lowering what I call the first fret and the last fret action. The first fret action is raised and lowered by virtue of cutting the nut slots down, or in our case using an adjustable nut to get it where you want. And the last fret action, as I measure it here, is adjusted by raising or lowering the bridge. Now, something I can see about this guitar, just jumping forward here, is like many of these guitars, this has a pronounced high saddle for the G, and you can sort of look across your strings and see the G stands tall above everything else. It actually does make it, if you've got very sensitive fingers, this really does stand out down here. I hate these kind of bridges for that. They're really crude in my book, and I don't like cutting notches in customers' bridges to balance them out. So I'm reluctant to do it, but at this stage in the game I really do recommend a really good improvement or enhancement. I find is a roller bridge for this kind of guitar. It doesn't do it any harm whatsoever. £15 from someone like Ben at Vanson Guitars on eBay. Very good quality Chinese bog standard roller bridge in chrome. And what you get from that is you get a much more evenly balanced spread of strings. You know, they don't stand out like this G. I mean, you can photograph this, you can see the gap. You get a better balance spread of across the radius. But the other thing you get is you get about a third again as much intonation room without the faff of having to change these little blocks back to front if you run out of intonation room. So a 15 quid improvement. I'm stupid, I really should keep a stock of them here, because almost every customer I mention it to goes, yeah, why wouldn't I have a 15 quid improvement? And it's a more comfortable play, slightly different visually from a conventional SG, but and it also technically helps the tuning, because when you're bending strings you're pulling them on a roller rather than you're scraping them across the top of this peak here. But having said this, this kind of improvement, Chris doesn't need me to do it today. He could quite easily buy that, install it himself, just plop it on the end there, The difference may be a slight bit of intonation, but again, I think it's worth doing. A note to self, I think I'm going to buy 3 or 4 of these and keep them in stock. I don't like having loads of stuff in stock, but it actually can turn out to be quite useful. So what we're going to do on this, having talked a bit about stuff, what we're going to do is a fairly standard thing for Relove guitars. So if you've seen this before, switch off now. If you've got short attention span, switch off now. If you hate me, switch off now, blah, blah, blah. What we're going to do is we're going to start by replacing the nut, because I want the nut right before I set it against, double check the relief, and then set the desired thingamajig, last fret action. Once I've got those 3 things where I want them, then I will play the guitar and see what kind of choking and buzzing we get, and then I'll level the frets to make them comply with the action I've chosen. So this bit, this also seems to freak some people out, taking off a nut, right? So some nuts are very, very, very precisely fitted, and more to the point, some nuts on some beautifully made guitars are not only fitted nicely and carefully crafted, there goes my nails, carefully crafted, they're also lacquered over so that the lacquering becomes, or the poly finish becomes one smooth, continuous surface. Where's that thing? This thing's gone invisible. I've coloured it stupidly in a tin of something TV yellow, and I can't spot it for the bamboo now when it's sticking up there. Yeah, so it can be really nicely finished in, and of course, if you take this off, you've got to, if it's that kind of finish, then you will break the lacquer. There's no way around it. But it's either you live with a plastic nut that isn't right. It's not the end of the world. You can cut a plastic nut and get it right, and then it will work forever. But my experience is harder to work plastic, and if you get it wrong, then you still got to take it out, because you can. It's so easy to overcut if the material you're using doesn't cut dependably, and that's why I like bone. So typically in my setups, I would replace this with bone, because I can get the first fret action much more dependably, and it's a nice, solid, good-looking material. In this case, we're going with an adjustable Tusq nut, and I'll show you what that means. Let's have a look. Okay, I've got a couple in stock. I need to order some more. Again, they're a bit like the bridges. They're not cheap. They're about £15 a time, £14 a time, and this little unit is really cool. This was devised by Graphtec, who make Tusq products, and it has 2 little grub screws, and it's tilting back on its little hinges on its little axis here, and it's an insert that was designed to go inside a nut arrangement that Gibson put on their more recent Les Pauls, because I think they'd had too many years of being ridiculed for their stupid plastic nuts or badly cut bone nuts. So they put in a kind of adjustable brass 0 fret arrangement, in which there was a middle part, there was like a tray and a middle part which went up and down, and that had the nut slots and the 0 fret at the front of it. Now what they found out pretty quickly, that brass is a terrible material for a 0 fret, so the Gibson thing notched all along the front. I think their solution was to manufacture a titanium one so that the customers could swap them out. But in the meantime, Tusq, or Graphtec, Canadian company, saw an opportunity, and instead of trying to make the same thing as Gibson, they made a nut insert, this thing here, which fitted into Gibson's little brass tray, but did away with the 0 fret part that notched. So you got a really good quality Tusq Les Paul style nut, which you could adjust to your perfect first fret action, kind of like the Gibson version, but it had the built-in lubricated qualities that come with Tusq, which is really good. And also because it's Tusq and it's a sort of plasticky material, it didn't notch. It wasn't like a 0 fret to notch. So of course I saw that and I thought, oh, I can use this. So what I do is I make up basically some, get it the right way around, I make up some bases in milliput. This one might be a good fit, or I might, no, that's good. So I mix up some milliput, and then I press these into it with actually cling film, set it, there you go, right in, let it set, and then when it's set, I can now use this pair of these things to create a custom fitting nut for here. Now Epiphone have very tall nuts, shall we say. By the way, coming back to the removal. This is just put in the slot. It isn't glued. It's glued in, but it's not polyed over. Even when it is, you really still have to do that. There's no real way around it. What you do in doing it gently is you're trying to mitigate the amount of any finish cracking, and typically some of the poly finishes can be very glassy and thick. This is actually paint with it looks like a fairly thin clear coat, and that came off quite easily. Some guitars I've seen where the paint kind of washes up in a skin because it's just been put on after the nut and then left to hang, and that can break off and you have to stick that back down and stuff, but that came off cleanly. What's also good is you can see it's a clean removal. There aren't any really bad things standing in the way, and a very small but inoffensive kind of patch of glue there which isn't going to get in the way of what we're doing. So the fun part of this now becomes a mixture of sanding and cutting with probably with a bandsaw, which is quite risky because it's a very small object. But what we're going to do is we're going to mixture of techniques. We're going to custom sand this right down to a perfect fit in here, and the aim of this will be to get, first of all, this shaped down to a perfect fit for this particular guitar, and we want to end up with this sitting in here and the strings just resting on the first fret, because then we can use the little accompanying hex key to lift it to the perfect action above the first fret. So an ideal target is to have the strings pressing down full weight, just touching the first fret. So I'm likely to, I could go down, actually the bandsaw feels like a bit of an overkill on this. I did the last one with a bandsaw. It saves me a few minutes, but it feels really, it's more likely to lose my fingers than achieve much. So on this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the front edge. And the front edge, and I've got the thing still in there, right? So I'm just going to start taking this down. I probably could have helped the process by sticking some new sandpaper. This is quite dusty, and so it kind of jams up the sandpaper before too long. So you do a couple of these nuts and you want to replace the sandpaper because it sort of gums it up. But my trick now is I want to cut this, sand this down perpendicular or in a straight line with the front face of the adjustable nut insert. And so I've got a coarse piece here and a finer piece here. So I'm still 1.5 millimeters away, and I can see as I go which end I'm taking more from than the other end, and I can increase some weight on that end to balance it out. So I want it nice and straight in line with the front edge of the nut, and I also want it same on both sides. So I'm tipping a bit too far back, so I'm going to tip forward on the front and then try and balance it back. And then when I get somewhere thereabouts, I just keep checking and feel my way to getting it down flush with the front edge. And I want a straight line, that's my target. And I'm still a little bit off. Hey, I was looking through my videos just now. Actually, I was over at my dad's and telling him about, he was asking about the YouTube channel, and I was talking about monetizing and how it works, because it's not his world exactly. And anyway, as much as I know about it. Anyway, I was telling him a bit, and I showed him kind of the little monetization kind of flag set against some of the videos in my kind of list of videos, and I noticed one of them was partially limited monetization or something. I think I've only got about 1 or 2 in the whole lot that have any restricted thing, and of course it's very difficult to know why they are in any way restricted. It's a bit of a mystery. So I had a quick look while I was there, and it was a video. I can't remember what it was a video about now, but anyway, so since I can't remember what it was about, I also have no real way of knowing what on earth was the problem stopping it being monetized. I was going to say sanitized, but that's what they want to do. But it could be anything right the way through to mentioning a certain political subject that, of course, advertisers don't want to go anywhere near because it's toxic. And my dad was sort of saying to me, God, is there somebody who sits there and goes through all of this stuff? And I was trying to explain to him, no, it's a piece of software. And I think it was a bit hard for him to get his poor noodles around, and I don't blame him. The idea that there's a bit of software listening out for mentions, human words in a video soundtrack, mentioning certain forbidden things. So, when you're doing a channel and you realise there is that pressure, and you're getting some monetization, and you think, oh, that's really cool. Like, I'm starting to get a bit of payback, and on top of good business or whatever. But you then start to feel the tentacles, I suppose, of control. Like, ooh, I better never say anything iffy. I better never voice a point of view, because otherwise they'll take my monetization away, and I'll be poor as a church mouse. So you can see I'm getting almost down to flush with that front. I've got a little bit of a crust of the edge there to come off, and then we'll be level with it. And once we're level with it, that will be us ready to move to another side. I'm just trying to do it as delicately as possible to keep the nice straight edge. It's almost there. I mean, if I lifted this off, it would just break off this little bit of excess stuff. So I'm just going to do it here, practically there. Look, it's just trying to come out. There, it's out. It's just a little flake now. Right, so there we are. We're at the front edge. It won't ever look quite as tight as that, because it's not meant. It can't work that way. It has to stand up on its little feet. So there'll always be a gap with this. Now I'm going to take the bottom part. Am I allowed to say that without getting demonetised? Oh, matron! Too risque, not family friendly. Right, I'll take the bottom part, and I'm just going to square that off as much as possible. So that's nice. Now, all I know at this point in time is that butts up nicely. Can I say that word? Butts up nicely. Butts up nicely. We could leave all that gloop on the end. It looks like somebody's fitted the nut on with the chewing gum, but I'm sure customers wouldn't totally appreciate that. So that's the front edge of this arrangement done, and then of course we've got to do the same thing with the back edge. Now you could file it off, but having started with the sandpaper and it's here, I shall carry on, and you can see you make a nice little sand dunes of white powder. As you could see if I pointed you at the right thing. Gosh. Anyway, and we are running a bit out of cutting ability here. But I'm using the coarse stuff and just getting down to close to where I want to be. Anyway, so yeah, it is a very strange moment where you start to realise that you have a choice about not modifying your behaviour exactly, because I'm not an F. Not in videos. I'm not an effer and a blinder, or I tend not to talk about too many controversial things, but still reached a point where you think, ooh, I've got something to lose here if I were to discuss an issue. And there is some weird thing about realizing that you could not sell out, I suppose, but I suppose in the 60s it would have been you sold out to the man or something, It's just realizing that, the minute you become attached to, whatever earnings this system gives you, you're bound by its strictures, and suddenly you've lost autonomy if you want that money. And I guess it's, it could be no different from playing in a, playing guitar in a function band or something. You can't be. You have to have a certain image. You have to dress a certain way. You have to perform certain songs and treat them a certain way. I guess in any jobbing thing, a certain degree of creativity may be sacrificed. Not always, but maybe. And it's a funny one. It's a luxury first world problem, obviously. And until now, I haven't really had to think about it, because I've never had any significant earnings from YouTube. I mean, by YouTube vlogger standards, what I earn from YouTube is not significant even now, but it's still become recently enough to at least think about for me on this channel. So it's a funny one to think, oh, better be careful, don't want to lose that, do I? So we're getting there, right? And we're now heading, I think we've got the right height. This will be just right, and we'll cut down a little bit until we'll keep testing until the strings are sitting on the first fret. But we've still got the back side of this. I'm very worried about saying that. We've got the back side of this to take down flush, and it typically works out that these fit when they're, I mean, Tusq have done a good job. They've designed these so they fit when both sides tend to be flush. So what I mean is the width of the insert tends to be just the width of a standard nut for this guitar, which is pretty cool. So I'm getting there with a degree of sort of care and accuracy. Of course there's powder and stuff all over the end of the guitar right now, but we'll clean that up at the end. So what I'm looking for is the point where this just fits into the slot perfectly, and to get there now I'm going to carefully go down to the fine grade sandpaper, because I can afford to lose this, because these only take a certain amount of time to make. They're not intrinsically massively expensive, but it's time and a bit of materials to make it. But I don't want to have to go back to square one because I was incautious with my sanding. That would be annoying. So we're getting close to the point of fitting, and you get what I mean. So I'll just keep going now and keeping it as flat to the actual insert as possible, and then we'll probably find that we just skim off that little crust again on this side. The nice thing about this, of course, is that even if you take a fraction, a few thous, microns of plastic or Tusq nut off the actual face of the nut, on the back end of the nut itself, it's not the end of the world, because it doesn't affect the operation of it. But what I'm really aiming for is to get this to fit in the slot just snugly. I don't want it to be so tight that I have to ram it in there, but I do want to end up with a nice snug fit. And actually I can probably just get it there now, the last few scrapes, and you can see again off comes a strip, a very thin strip, and we're down. Now again, this isn't quite even, but we will sand that top bit down as well until we get it just in the right size. That's now sticking in, so it's fractionally off, only a milli fraction, and I'll still keep going from the back side. If we have to take any down off the actual width of the Tusq adjustable nut itself, then I recommend take it from the back side, because that's kind of nothing, well, less to do with the operation of the nut than the front side is. So that's really snug, and I'm just going to now take the front edge, alter just the angle a tiny fraction, which will serve or effectively thin the base down a tiny bit more. So now I expect this to just drop perfectly into place. Again, still almost perfectly into place. Again, I'm just looking for the right angles that need to be just right, which they are, and a little bit more on the back edge now. Okay, now this I expect will fit. Yeah, okay, that's great. So now currently just looking at it, it's too high by about 1 millimeter. We've also got ends sticking out, which again we can carefully flatten down. And you notice how I'm moving the whole of my body and keeping the nut end in the same position. So I'm hoping I'm getting it vertical as much as possible, and then I'm keeping it still, and I'm moving all of me, and then I end up coming down to a point where I've got nearly flush, but it hasn't wiggled woggled all over the place. It's quite difficult to do, but you can see when it's vertical, and you can keep it going from there. That's pretty good on that side. I'll put a little corner on it in a minute. And again, the same thing with this end or this side. Again, kind of get it as vertical as you feel you can, and then move the whole lot of you in a very silly little wiggling movement. But it is much better than going, because that then introduces a lot of wiggle into the piece you're trying to work on. And you know, we're at the stage now where it's very delicate, or relatively delicate. We don't want to snap it, or we don't want to mess it up, because we've now already put a fair bit of precision into making it. Okay, so again, I can hold it steady enough to get a reasonable end on it, providing I don't overcut it and I don't waggle it from side to side, get any silly slopes on it. Okay, a little bit more and we're almost there. And here are my fabulously creaky boots. Okay, that's all right for now. Now what I'm going to do is, I know what a little thing I'll do just to be on the safe side. I'm just going to mark my front edge under here, so I just know which way I'm putting the nut. Now it'll be, I can check it because there's a little imprint in there of the lettering from the nut. Now you see, you take it out and you've got a very thin little bit here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to very, very carefully run this again, just holding the thing here the lightest touch, because I don't want to snap anything. And I'm starting with the highest part, and I'm just gently bringing it down until it's even all the way around, and it's very, very delicate process, but it's worth doing right. Okay, so I can see I put pen on the inside where the edge is, so you can see I'm not quite there yet, but I'm coming downwards to a very precise little block, and I've got my nut here. Now the only issue, the only thing I'm not happy with entirely, is this isn't the hardest material I would have liked, and I'm still, it's pretty tough, it's pretty hard, and it does the job. But in an ideal world, and this is standing on about 2 millimeters of this milliput stuff, in an ideal world and in the future, I aim to have this standing on a cream coloured resin. That would be my target, but right now it doesn't do that. It's on milliput. Now there we are, pushed right into there, nice and solid, and we look at it in there, and it's sitting nicely, but we don't have to guess. We can put the strings back on for a second and we can tighten them up a little bit. First of all, let's put it in the slot so it's nice and snug. I'm not worried too much about its left and rightiness. Is that all the way in? Okay, so we're a bit high on the one side, so then we put the middle ones on first. Don't worry about all the flour everywhere, that will get cleaned up in due course. So I'm putting all the strings back on, and you can hear straight away that when I put them under load, it will push the nut right into its little housing for the now, as far as it can go. And what you'll see is it's still too high, so I can basically say that I want to remove this gap and end up with these sitting on there. So from the bottom of this, I can take what I know to be, I can take a millimeter. Right now, I could be, oops, I want to take the one at a time. If you don't take them one at a time, you end up flipping the nut. So same as when you're changing strings, reconnect them middle outwards and then take them off, slack them off, so nothing's going to flip the nut. It's designed, you know, it will come out, as you can see. We can remove it when we want, eventually. If we can get my fingernails in there, okay, it will come out. Wow, that's quite tight. It will come out, and but so when you're changing the strings, make sure you change it that way. I might just scrape around the inside of this with a knife just to make sure we get right into the corner and it's not catching, because that felt a little bit tighter than I would want it. I want it to move, when we have it installed. So I'm just going to gently carve away a little bit there. I think it's obstructing it, and we'll again feel it. Right, so front end facing this way. So from the, there you go, it's actually nice and snug. So I know I need to take 1 millimeter from the bottom of this. So again, you might as well, while you're at it, while you're doing it, if you're doing it, put that back in and leave it as one part of the whole thing. And then we can, to be precise, we can draw a line down there. I'm going to guess, oh sorry, you're not even looking at me, how rude of you. I'm going to draw myself a 1 millimeter line, which is a purely visual thing at the moment, but it's just a guide to stop on. There you go. And I'm going to sand this down here, and I'll do it on this light one because I want to take some down, but I don't want to do it so fast that I could run into trouble and have the wrong angle on the bottom there. So time we've got, and we don't want to have mistakes. Now I'm tilted back forward a little bit, so I'm going to tilt back to correct that, and that's the nice thing about doing this slowly. I want this, most important, this base wants to be perpendicular, or yeah, perpendicular, no, I don't know, parallel is the right word. This base here wants to be parallel to, not this top here, that can be a little ragged, but it wants to be parallel to this edge here, and I need a little bit further backwards on the angle, and we'll be there. And that will make sure that the nut sits in its place at the right angle. Not a right angle, but the correct angle is what I mean. You know what I'm saying. Okay, so we're getting close to the millimeter. I can see the nice little angle is correct, and I'm trying to remove now without introducing any other angles into this cut. But because you've got the grub screws to go upwards, there is a bit of leeway if you get it wrong. So you can go a little bit further down than you were thinking, because you've got the upwards movement that's always possible. At this stage we were just aiming to have the strings sitting on the, that's looking good, sitting on the fret, first fret. So you have got a fair bit of leeway. I'm just going to flatten this up again just to be absolutely sure. Okay, I think we are pretty much there. Right, so you see why, snowstorm, you see why it takes a bit of time, and why each one is individual to each guitar. Epiphones typically have taller nuts. I've said this before and not giggled. They have taller nuts than many other guitars, and consequently a bass that I make for somebody else's guitar wouldn't necessarily fit on this one. Okay, so as we tighten this up, it all sits down neat and tidy, pretty much where it wants to be, and that actually still fractionally above the mark. It's nearly there. Now we could go with that. I said I wanted to start with the strings touching the first fret. Actually, I will do a tiny adjustment. That's almost there. So I'm as near as damn it there. The reason I'm going to do a tiny bit more is because I'm going to do something else that I forgot to mention, which is sort of handy and it helps things away. Remember I said this material isn't like metal or even like solid resin. It's a sort of 2-pack putty that goes very hard and can be drilled and sanded and all that stuff. But one of the things that I want to do, which I hadn't got around to doing, first of all I'm going to take a tiny bit more off the nut, get the right side, and we needed a little bit more off the treble end. So now this is at the lightest possible touch, and we can afford to let it run. How are we doing? Yep. That will be on the strings now. Sorry, on the first fret. That's nice and nice at the right height. And then the one little thing I'm going to do, which I hadn't spoken about is I'm going to take the nut insert, the adjustable insert out again, and I'm going to wind forward, just very slightly, wind forward the grub screws until they're just poking out of the base, and I'm going to use the same sandpaper to just flatten these off, because what I don't want is I want a flatter foot, and this will allow me to have that, so that it spreads the weight a little bit better on the milliput that it's standing on. So just poke it through a bit more, blow the dust off, and we've got a flat foot now. It had before, it had a sort of knurled end, which could, that's got a bit more to do actually, that one, could end up, you know, if we're not careful, it could end up drilling a bit more into the milliput base, which I don't want to happen. So just going to sand that off. We're not too concerned about the underside of this the unit itself, because it's never going to sit flat on that. What we're concerned about is just getting the screws just flattened off. Not really many other ways to do it other than this. So that's the front edge. I'm going to sit it there. And also, when you're doing this, it turns the screw and pushes them in, so it's not actually a very easy way of achieving that. But that'll be an improvement. Right. So after all of that, we are now kind of nearly ready. A little cleaning cloth for a second. We'll just get rid of some of that dust. So now the question is, are we happy with this? Are we ready to go? So I'll put that in there. Feel how it sits in. We're sitting proud a little bit at this end, which could be the fact that that's sitting in. Okay. The strings will bottom it out anyway. So now the interesting bit is we need to just check where it lines up. We'll check it again for height before we glue it down. And once I'm happy where it is, I'm going to put a tiny dab of glue to fix it in. What I also might want to do is just tailor it back, depending on which end's slightly sitting proud, but we can very lightly do it. So I'm going to do the middles first. Now they are sitting on the first frets now. That one's almost on the first fret. That one's pretty much on it. That one's on it. Yeah, running off the first fret. So it's using the first fret as a 0 fret now. And there we go. So my main thing at this point in time is I know the height's right, and what I can now do is, when I'm ready, is I can introduce the actual playing height by a tiny adjustment on the hex screw, on the grub screw here. And that's what gives us our controllability. Now, there we have all the playing strings, and they're incredibly low over the first fret. Transforms the way the guitar feels to play. That's one of the biggest improvements you can make on your guitar. Now, the thing I'm concentrating on right this second is the physical positioning of it, and it's a little bit biased in favour of the there's a bit of too much space on at the moment on the treble side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to slack it off again, and I'm going to take the Q as the base edge here, and I'm going to make sure that is flush to the body of the guitar, or the neck I should say. And once we got that flush, we know that that is exactly in place. So again, I can just lift it out, put it back together again. Just check these, they're good. Look at that little cricket's going outside now. I think summer's come back. Okay, so it's not going to sit right down now, because at this point in time it's still wound in. I've been making my own adjustable nuts for sort of Strat style guitars, but a similar thing is I'm not 100% happy with what happens over time. The feet very slightly tend to press down and compress some of the rosewood a tiny fraction, but if it does, it's not ideal, even though, you know, the customer can just rate it up again, but not what I want. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to reduce almost all of that little proud bit there until we're flush, and then we're ready to go and we know where it's going to sit. So again, the old vertical whole body thing going on. Close. Good. That'll do. Right, so we know exactly where the positioning is going to go, and it's going to be flush to the. God, imagine if the police broke in now; they would think I was running a. What was that? Breaking Bad factory? No, or whatever. Colombian marching powder or something. So this is a little bit iffy because this stuff is quite warm-ish at the moment, and this stuff has a habit of going off quite quickly when you're not ready for it. But know which way round it is. Get your strings out of the way. Know where you're going. Going absolutely flush on this side. Nice and flush now on that side. Press it in, and Bob's your uncle. Now, just to confirm this, I'm going to restring. Oh, actually no, I'll just save time. Before I restring, because I'm pretty certain we're going to need to do a little bit of fret leveling, the next thing to do while your strings are in that configuration is to get hold of your pen, your marker pen, which is a new Sharpie wedge shaped thing I bought, chisel I should say, and we're going to mark up all the frets, and these are going to be, that's going to be the guide for our fret leveling and tell us what's going on and how much we have leveled. How much we need to level in this method is told to us by the playability of the frets as we do the leveling, so that we'll be able to hear and feel with our own ears and fingers when we've reached the correct amount of levelness, and we don't go beyond that, which is why this method is very effective in saving on fret metal. Other methods tend to kind of level to an arbitrary degree of levelness, which is cool, you know, so you can at least say, wow, it's 100% level, but in reality you're going beyond what you need to do. So to me that seems costly in the fret metal stakes, so I don't want to go there. So actually, funny enough, oh no, they're all on the first fret. I was going to say they're all playing. No, they're all sitting on the first fret. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to gently, and I don't want to drill this so it cuts too far into the milliput, but I want to raise up, and we don't want to limit this to as much as possible. We don't want to spend hours playing backwards and forwards with this, because you will eventually kind of drill into the milliput. It's not the strongest material in the world, as I said, but it's a good working material for the time being. I still am in research to find the right stuff. Now, give it a good stretch. Now I'm going to tune and stretch. Now the actual tuning isn't terribly important, but what matters is the tension. So we want it in tune insofar as it's putting the correct tension on the neck for a 10 gauge of strings. Do that without breaking it. Feels like lightning compared to what it was. So at the moment we're about 0.2 of a millimetre. That's blistering, and we have a little hex key which I will give Chris with a bit of sticky tape on the old what's it call it, scratch plate thing. So next bit now is just to get the measuring device out and just get clear that we're at the right sort of start action. Now I said before that on an SG, because of the flexibility of the neck, you can go actually lower than almost all other kinds of guitars, but I'm not going to overtax it. I mean, we're at 1.25 there, which is pretty scorchingly low, and we're about the same there. Now typically there'd be a small gradient, and I think this would be an absolutely wicked action for an SG. Now the point is, it could be too low for somebody, and of course you can always raise the action a tiny bit to your liking. And now, having seen the video, you could also increase the neck relief if you feel doesn't suit your playing style. Look. No detuning, you hear that? Perfectly in tune, open chords. Now the one remaining issue at this point is okay, I'm not going to test anything else just yet. I know we need to do some fret leveling for that action because we're hearing that choke out. So I get my, I'm going to use a set of balls number 3. No, I'm going to use the U channel, the StewMac U channel. Again, I used it the other day and I'm going to use it now. So here we are with the method. We got all things the way we want them. Action at a blistering low action, really pushing it. Nice low action here, correct minimum amount of neck relief. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to now use my cutesy little devices, and with these here little devices we're going to basically tune this little baby with a different one. We're going to tune this, yikes, this truss rod, U-channel truss rod. We're going to tune it until the curve matches the curve on this here guitar. Now, funnily enough, it is pretty much starting off like that. In fact, it's a tiny bit over curved, a millifraction. Now, the amount of adjustment there, you wouldn't be able to measure it with any device known to man, but it's enough to make a difference, and it's still a tiny bit more. But these are absolutely scrawny little adjustments to get where we want to go. But when we get where we want to go, then we're ready to level away. I think that'll do me. So, having tuned the truss rod to the same curve as the neck, which is very small, as you know, I'm now going to place it upon the neck, or the frets, and I'm going to, aided by gravity mostly, I'm going to just run it up and down, following the curve of the neck that way a little bit, although it's only a very thin track. I'm not kind of doing it in great big wide scrapes. I've seen people talk about leveling frets with a big diamond coated blade sharpener type, a chisel sharpening stone, and they go well, they're basically creating a zero radius, or an infinite radius. I mean, that's you don't want to be doing that. You don't want to be scraping with a great wide tool like that. So that's why I use a very thin one. In fact, the one I often use is even thinner, again by half. So lots of little samples across the radius is better than some great big flat thing. Anyway, so the first thing I do once I've done that is I get and check each individual note. Beautiful, tiny little hint of squint up there. So with that in mind, I'm going to lever this off again. We've taken hardly any metal off the frets to achieve that. So I'm just going to take that off, and at this end I'm just going to focus my attention a fraction more at this end. Same curve, it should be leveling all the way as well, but I've just put a little bit of extra effort, and I can see I've taken a bit more of that end. Now that is a intuitive thing, it's precise, but it's learned experience. Perfect. Now what I don't know is how these frets interact with that E string bent in this direction, and I'll find out that in a minute once I've kind of got across the B and into the G track. And once I'm there, I won't not only be testing the individual notes, but I'll be also testing the big bends on the high E and the B, because there's no point having a low action if the notes you're trying to play as a lead guitarist are choking out as you bend them. It's one of the most depressing things to have. Hello, Morris. You come to apologise for eating that little bird this morning. No, I didn't think you were. He did. Bless him. Okay, so we're now doing the same thing down the B track, and mostly gravity, not really pressing much, just holding it in place. And as it goes, this is where it is a mixture of experience and skill. Same thing, really. There's a little kind of trough here, but it's not a major issue at this action. The beauty of this system as well is you don't need an absolute levelness. You only need level to enable the action you want to play. Now this is pretty good. You've got a little bit of ziz going across there into the G, but this working this down the G track now should clear that out. And having said that, what's true is I set an incredibly low action overall. This guitar will be, the feel of this guitar will be completely unrecognised when Chris picks it up tomorrow. And sometimes it's almost too much, which is why I definitely suggest that people can adjust the action upwards a little bit if it's just too different. The biggest change pound for pound is doing that. The change at the nut is phenomenal. It transforms the way the guitar plays. Often when we grew up as kids we thought changing the action here would be the big deal. And of course it makes it nicer for lead guitar players and so on, but the real change, the visceral feel, the biggest pound for pound, bang for buck type of change is the nut. Not only in the ease of playing down at this end, it just feels like the strings aren't there basically. Not only the ease of playing, but also in the tuning stability, which is really important too. So you know, you get an absolute massive improvement by doing what I just did with the nut. Or if you haven't got one of these and you don't want to do this approach, by cutting the nut slots properly on an existing nut to give you a low first fret action. Individual notes all playing. So what we're feeling, what we're hearing here is we're in a little flat spot in the neck. Well, not flat, it's actually a little dent in the neck. And as a result, notes played and bent around here are just causing that tiny Z. Now I know from experience that a minuscule upward movement here, back to perhaps more conventional actions that I would have on a guitar like this, will clear that up. But I like to start off by trying to eke it out first. But it is, I don't know if you can see it, there's a little gap, the little cluster there, there's cutting here, the little cluster here where it's, I can tell it's slightly sunken. You can't see it by the eye, but the tool is telling me it's slightly sunken. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do another quick go down here in the same track to see if I can just level that out. And if I can't on this run, I'm going to recalibrate as I do it because I want to get this exactly right. And if I can't level that or cure those little zings that we heard there, then what I'll be aiming to do is I will kind of carry on and then possibly make the tiniest upward adjustment with the action. And having set it ridiculously low to begin with, I have given myself the room to do that. What's great about this sort of compromise swings and roundabouts thing is the amount of adjustment that this fix in inverted commas would need is so tiny that you wouldn't notice it in terms of the feel of the guitar. If I handed it you 1 second, you played it, and I handed it you after I'd done that adjustment, you wouldn't feel the difference. But it's enough to clear that little zinging sound. And that little zing is the beginning of a fret interrupting the free ringing of the note. Where it goes zzz. think that's pretty good actually. I'm going to leave it there, and I'm going to move on to the D track. Now we know we've got a bit of a problem down here with the, where was it? Somewhere down here with the E, on the E string. We know there's going to be a bit of cutting needed on the fret leveling, which is fine, it's to be expected. As I said to Chris a little bit earlier on, almost no guitar leaves the factory with completely even frets, and the reason for that is numerous things. Differences in manufacture, irregularities in manufacture of the fret at different places, different parts of the fret wire bale or whatever, different pressures or different you know, slightly uneven surface that they're being pressed into, like this little cluster of frets here. One of the things that's interesting is that the reason I use this method, another reason I use this method, is when you take the strings off and you flatten the neck relaxes and you might get it totally flat, and then you do all of this. Then what happens, what you're seeing here, this tool has detected a little sink here, right? You wouldn't see that if you leveled the neck, it wouldn't necessarily stay. You're seeing this when everything's under compression, first of all, and bending. So it's under load, and then up shows this little trough. Now, if that didn't show up when you leveled it flat, it'll reintroduce it when you've done your fret leveling and you put the strings back on. Suddenly you're choking when you're bending at your really low action, and you wonder why. And it's because the compression. Well, put it simply, it's because that when you level with the strings off and the neck flat, you've taken out of the equation compression of the neck that the string loading puts on it. And however small, that loading does come back into play when you put the strings back on. Now, because we're leveling with that compression already at play, we are taking care of any of the weird effects that happen. Who was that? We're taking care of the leveling with that compression at play, and it makes it just fractionally more accurate. In other words, you're not going to put the strings on and suddenly find hellfire. I thought they were all level. My rocker told me, my fret rocker told me they were all level, and then suddenly you're still getting a choking out. And this way takes care of that, because all of the playing conditions are now at play, literally, which is why I like this method as well. Okay, so I'm conscious that there's a bit of buzzing down here, or there was when I tried it out. So now I'm going to be attentive to how each individual note plays. Little ditch here, see? So at this manically low action, we're just sinking into that ditch, and it's causing that little bit of a bzzz. So I'm going to do a little bit more leveling, and again, as always, I like to recalibrate if I know I'm hitting on a little problem area. And recalibrate just means I put everything back on, and I just go and find, and this is actually slightly over curved, it's minuscule, but there we go. So we put this back on and we get it connecting with all three at once, and we've got basically we've mapped the curvature of the neck into the tool. Now this time I'm going to do the same thing. I've recalibrated, but I'm also going to just focus my attention a little bit more at this end, where I know we've got this little this little ditch that needs gently evening out between it and the surrounding frets. Now, the attentive people among you will recognise that a low fret or cluster of low frets is as much of, if not more of a problem in actuality than a high fret. A high fret is kind of easy, you just take it down to the level of the ones around it. A low fret, or a pair or cluster of low frets, is a different problem altogether. First of all, you don't know you've got them until you get to this stage. They're impossible to measure or see. There's no tool. You might say the Plek machine, fine, but there's no average luthier tool that will tell you that you've got, or spot unevenness, but you can still have it, or you can still have lowness, because a low couple of frets, a single low fret can be that it's been hammered in too hard or pressed too hard on the press, or the wood at that point was a little softer than at other places and it's sunk a little lower for the same amount of pressure. A number of things can happen. But the point of the reason it's important is that a low fret makes the frets after it high, effectively, relatively speaking. So you've got a problem if you've got a single low fret. You can even everything out as much as you can, and then your finger goes, or your string goes into that gap, and it has to come out of the dip, and the next fret is effectively high, although it isn't relative to pretty much everything else. Like I say, that's not bad. I'm going to do a tiny bit more and we're done. So when you get to that place, you've got to make constantly kind of make a judgment call, because it's practically impossible to know until you get here that you've got a problem with a low fret or a low set of, or a low cluster of frets, and then you have to decide, is it bad enough that I need to pull that fret or those frets all together because it's going to cost me far too much fret metal in all the other frets, or can I continue and just, will it cost me just enough material to balance it out, or basically grind down or cut down until you bottom out the low frets. And it won't be exact because you've still got some action height down here, so you won't have to get to exactly bottoming out, but just enough to make it play. And in this case, you see I've done it to the point where it plays. Yeah, and I've done it with the leveling method. I've yet to come across one that I thought was so bad that I literally had to pull it right out and start again. And the reason for that is numerous, multiple reasons. One of them is because it's actually a much bigger hassle than it sounds. Pulling a fret out of here means you've got to find a matching fret. You've then got to install it, trim it. You've then got to try and file it down to the point where it's level with all the others without taking off material around it, because that's defeating the object. And actually, remember to take from the middle first, Samuel. And actually that's just, it does defeat the object if you end up grinding down frets to take a high one down. You might as well just have ground the other ones down to meet the low one. So it's not easy to do. And actually, when you're pressing in a single fret on a set neck like this, and you can't put it through your fret press if it's up here, you have to hammer it in or clamp it in, then you're not even guaranteed that fretting is going to be great, and you may find yourself going right the way through the whole process and finding that you've still got a problem. So it can be a major faff. So as yet I haven't reached a point where I've picked up a single fret that's so bad that I had to pull some. I've had situations where I've done refrets and I've pulled a fret because it just wasn't seated properly, but that was way before I could see that, and it was way before I ever got to the fret leveling stage, or playing test notes while fret leveling. When you're doing the fretting yourself, it's pretty, you know pretty quickly if something's not sitting correctly. So that's quite rare too, thankfully, because it can be demoralizing. And sometimes you just don't know why it is. It can really be present you with a conundrum. Anyway, so that's that bit done. In a sense, that's a real precision bit done. Like I say, with this one, I'm not going to cut down this notch. Cutting down the notch introduces problems. For example, you've got to get the exact right height. Whoops, there goes the nut. You've got to get the exact right height, and then you've got to find a way of microscopically smoothing the notch down so it doesn't cut strings and so on. So it is an absolute pain in the butt. I'm annoyed because I can see that G sits a little higher. What I think I will do is, I think I'll suggest, I'll report this to Chris, and I will suggest replacing it with a good quality budget roller bridge, and then when he comes back, I think he may pass down to get his other guitar in a couple of weeks' time, then bring this one and we'll just swap it over. It's that simple. And then there may be a small action tweak and maybe a small intonation tweak, but they're a matter of minutes work. Okay, so having now we've relaxed the neck and it's kind of eased off, the compression's gone, and it's doing it whatever it does, right? It doesn't really matter. Whatever we want to do now, we do the re-crowning or the crowning, reprofiling of the frets, which means we take the slightly flattened frets and we make them more arch shaped again. We can then polish them all out and then clean the rest of the guitar up, and then when we want to, we can come to replace the strings. We put the new strings on. We're going to go 10s again, and as soon as we put it under load, that neck is going to revert to the configuration and the state in which we leveled it, which means it's going to go back to perfectly level. No matter what the funny twists and sunken bits are, it's going to go back to where we had it. And even if we lose this, it drops off, or these things change or whatever, that's absolutely no problem, because we can wind it back up to 1.2 millimeters as I had it. We'll probably even go a little higher because that's crazy low, but we know that it will go as low as 1.2 millimeters on the bass side. But we can wind it back to the action we want, and then it will play exactly as we had it just now. One of the things I'm just going to take care of, in fact I can, no, this will stay on. One of the things I'm going to take care of here is the jack socket. I'm just going to have to check inside. Now it's come loose and it is affecting the contacts. I heard the tone kicking in and out when I wiggled it. So I'm just going to make sure that it's not touching anything on the inside before I tie it down. I have a tool that I could tie it down from the outside without going behind here, but I want to make sure that because it's come loose already, it's very likely to have stressed the wiring in here. And that's one of the kind of rules of thumb of guitar electrics, is that they don't like movement. Solder does not like movement, and that's why I think this was a bad design. There's so much levering force going in this direction from your jack plug. Even when you wrapped it around the strap, inherently it's levering, and you've got a lot of force in that because it's levering from the end of the jack. That's why when I make my SGs, I put the jack plug on the end, because it's not doing as much levering. It's coming out and going down. But the other reason, by the way, is that because of the levering, not only does the jack come undone like it has here, it also splits the thin mahogany that these holes are drilled into, which again is solved. If you put it on the side, then you're going into a much thicker piece of mahogany and you've got a lot more strength. So just a quick look under here. Oh, very pretty. Oh, I didn't realise these are coil splits. Okay, see, I didn't even try that. Okay, yeah, now this is spinning round and it's touching out. Wish I had my camera, but I don't. The jack is spinning and the earth is touching out on the signal for this. What is this? This is the tone pot here. So that's why I was getting tone cut in and out. So that's the problem. That's crap. I mean, you know, if it stayed round here, out of the way, that's pretty close actually. It's far too close. So it could be that this is moved around and that's moved around. But anyway, that was causing problems. So we're going to fix it, because it shouldn't be like that. So the question is, questionnaire, if we remove, let's make things at least as good for ourselves as possible. Let us remove. Alright, these are a bit difficult to remove because they are brittle, these damn witches' hats. But we need to remove the one next to the thing, so we'll try our very kindly bequeathed, donated knob puller. What a brilliant tool, and thank you to the kind soul. Oh, Christ, no, I don't like doing that. Right. Now, I don't know if this is loose, but even if it isn't, we need to rotate it and get it into a better position, which is going to get out of the way of the jack socket. But again, because of the movement thing, this is always, that's loose, you see. It's always likely to end up back there, which we don't want it to be. So I'm going to put this back under tension and stop it toning, hopefully, with my finger. Again, this is thin mahogany. You don't really want to put so much force into it because you can split it just by over tensioning pots. Now, having put that round there, I also I want this to go side on to here and make sure it stays in place. So I also now can do this and hold it with my finger. Now, what I have used, I used some light grade fairly light grade. I don't know how strong it is, but it's a kind of low strength thread lock, and I've used it occasionally. I've made a mistake of using the high strength one before, and you end up not being able to get the damn thing off ever again. But I am going to just tack a little bit of this on here because it is so important this doesn't move. And it's even, you can even see this is cracked the finish because it's been tightened up so much. By the way, and that wasn't me, but it has. That's a mistake of having it on this front panel. It's a big design stupid no-no for my book. Anyway, let's just try and get this. Oh, this damn nut won't go back on. Why? Junk. Oh, please. I'm losing my mind. Holy cow. Can't get it on. It's like it's got guns on it or something. I don't mean the thread lock either. Come on, come on. There's something wrong with the thread on this. I don't know what's happened to it in the past, but it's kind of not willing to do up. Right, now I want this round here, sort of half on, half off, out of the way. This, not sure about this. Don't like this jack terribly much. Right, I sort of put it in a way. We got the sorry, not the earth. It was the hot touching out on the other one. But anyway, we've got the jack comes through there, and actually, it's not even great because it's coming through and hitting a wire. So that really needs to be out of the way of there more so. And that tucked under there might help. Not brill. Can I push that behind there? Will it go behind there? No, probably not. Can I tuck it in there, please? No, it won't go, but at least that's out of the way. That's out of the way. What I can also do is I'll put a little bit of tape between the two, just in case of a future wiggle, and then there's a chance that it will, even if it turns another day in the middle of a gig, it's not going to touch out. It can't touch out. So it's not the tidiest thing to have that sitting in there, but it's going to go some way towards, actually that's too much, it's going to go some way towards preventing it grounding. It's very difficult to work with tape inside a cavity like this, but okay, that's just sitting there ready in case this thing swivels again one day in the future. Okie dokie. So again, I'm going to come back to here, and I have a little block that I made. I don't know if it's the right one for this guitar, but it works on the Les Paul. No, it's not good for this. Have a look. I had a little wooden block that you could put in here, and it holds the thing in place while you do the jack plug up. And that's a bit of a... It has to be under such tension to stop it moving that you are one is afeared of the pressure it's putting on that mahogany piece there. Okay, so that's that taken care of before we do anything else. So, but that's a fundamental thing, because that would have seriously messed up live playing, for example, because you wouldn't know. It's not immediately apparent, but it's causing the movement was causing, in the short term, causing it to ground out against the tone pot, causing a drop out in tone. And then longer term it would have snapped off the solder, and then it would have stopped working. Probably at the least opportune moment. Okie dokie, right, so I'm going to take that as done, but I won't take anything for granted, so I'm just going to do a quick pickup check as we stand, even without strings. I just want to make sure this thing works before I march kind of merrily onwards. It's always a good idea to check that out. String! That ain't gonna work. the one in question. Good. Okay, yeah, so you see it's what a rubbishy setup. Pulling it straight out of there, it's almost inevitably going to cause movement. Okay, so then we get all these little fellas back pointing where they were pointing, and we do the same with this one. Meanwhile, we can clean around the pots a bit. I don't want to pull them all off. These witches' hats make me afeared that they're going to snap, and it's not worth it for just a little bit of extra cleaning around the edge. We can get it fairly clean, because they do tend to get pushed on really hard in order to stay where they're supposed to stay. Very primitive way of doing things. Okay, so having fixed that, we know that's kind of out of our worry sphere. Next bit is to do the reprofiling, and I'm going to use the medium size side of this tool. And this is, as I said, just to take off any flat shoulder off the frets that we've leveled off at all, and it's pretty effective. There's hardly any material taken off here, as evidenced by the fact that I'm not spending any time leveling these off. When we come to one or two at the end, well, there's one that has a little bit more, and I have to just hang around a tiny bit more, taking it back to a nice arch shape. And the fact is that in doing it, let's double check. If we leave a tiny thin strip of marker pen down the middle, what we know is that we've rounded and reshaped the edges, but we haven't touched the top. And if we haven't touched the top, then we haven't lowered it any more than it was, and that means it still maintained its relative levelness, or its levelness relative to the frets either side, which was the whole point of the leveling process. So very critical that we don't overwork this tool at this point. We're just rounding or returning the flattened fret hopefully to an arch shape. That's the idea. And so we're kind of moving quite quickly through it because there's not a lot of actual material in sheer volume taken off in this process. We haven't hit them that hard. It's okay. Now what this guitar also needs is a bit of a clean up on the frets too, because they're a bit grubby. We'll take care of that in a minute. Now these last three frets were hit fairly hard, so they're going to take a little bit more, as you can see, to round off to end up with the thinnest possible black strip down the middle. Okay, that's that. Now, while it's still mucky, I'm going to get my fairly mucky cloth out, and clumsy or what, and just basically rub down these frets. Now this will remove any remaining traces of marker pen. That's good. Any dust it'll pick up, and you can see the finger goes black, but it will also remove kind of little sand dunes of finger grease which build up over time. Everyone does, but it's a nice quick way to get a quick clean over, and it feels a lot fresher. It also dries it out because it's removing some of the oil from the wood, but we'll kind of replace that with some lemon oil in a minute, which will return some of the luster to the fingerboard. So having done the fret leveling, having done the fret reprofiling, and having done a quick but thorough clean of the board and the frets, what remains to do now is a bit of an all-over clean. Gets rid of some of this horrible dusty stuff that's built up, always does. And then once we've done that, we're into a sort of slightly dreary fret polishing routine, which is where I usually switch off and put the radio on. But it's about half an hour of careful sanding through a series of grades of paper, and we go from 600 to 1000 to 1500 in paper, and then I switch to micro mesh, which runs from 1500 up to 12,000, which ends up with a pretty nice polish on it. I used to go to the level of buffing wheels and things but I tend to stay a bit clear of that because for the amount of time it takes, it doesn't really produce. It produces a very sparkly finish, but it doesn't really make a massive amount of difference to the playability for the amount of time spent on it as an economic decision. So I kind of pulled back a bit from doing that. Tempting though it was, it's almost a bit overkill, because the truth is they get very quickly dulled up by normal finger grease and stuff, and they only look like that for about 5 minutes. Now it's very cute. If you can see it, it's quite a nice visual thing, but as I say, it's quite a lot of work involved to get to that stage. My primary concern is a good playability for the right level, and all the notes bending. So I prefer to focus time on the playability rather than the absolute cosmetic. Although it's a nice thing to be able to do to get a bit of a clean going on here. Tunematic bridges are very difficult to clean all the way through because you've got lots of little tiny components which are kind of really difficult to get in between of. So you can get a reasonable job done, but there's again a limit to that. I wish this was, we could just fix this stupid G string thing here, but we can't. Right, so that's that, and a little bit of a clean up on the headstock as well, and then we'll flip it over and take care of the other side. This will get dusty again in a minute when I do the sanding out, but it won't be more than a quick brush over. This is more of the deep clean with the naphtha solvent, get the grease and stuff off, and then at the end we'll just need to wipe it down really to get any residual dust off. But this is in good condition generally. Okay, so that's that bit done. You can see the fingerboard is now looking very clean, but also a little bit dry. I'm not going to do anything with that just yet. We'll leave the oiling till we've done the sanding part. The reason for that is we need at this point we need the super glue, masking tape to stick effectively to the fingerboard. Otherwise, if you put the oil on now, the paper will just fall off and it won't protect the fingerboard. So we do the whole thing of these are going to really enjoy being sanded out because they are fairly dulled up at the moment. Yeah, so we just tape everything off, and of course the next part of this is I'm going to need to a bit of naphtha still on there. It's like water under there. Yeah, so we'll do the polishing. To mask it all off, I'll go off camera and I'll need to cut a load of little thinner strips and fill in down here. That'll take a while, and then I'll do the sanding, dust it all over again, and then we'll come back on with the oiling of the fingerboard done and some new strings ready to go on, and that will be most of the precision part of it done. And then we'll put on new strings, and it'll be a matter then of stretching them out thoroughly and finally intonating them. Just before I go for this short bit, the important bit about the stretching cannot be, well, the importance of stretching cannot be stressed too much. Just remember that people have understandable misapprehensions about what affects tuning, and so many people, myself included, throughout 30 years of playing or whatever, somehow quite reasonably thought that my tuners might have something to do with tuning. So, as it happens, I had a JV Squire Strat which came with the original split post tuners, and they were incredibly stable, because actually inherently split post tuners are, because of the way they hold almost no slack anywhere in the system. But so I was spoiled by having fabulously stable tuning, but I still sort of bought the line. I would have told you that if you'd said your tuning was all over the place, I would have said, oh, buy some new tuners or whatever. And actually, it was only when I started doing this that it became clear that the tuners have nothing to do with tuning stability at all. And I don't mean, I'm not being hyperbolic, it's true, they have nothing to do with it. They have everything to do with a different experience of tuning. So the better they are, the more precise they are, better manufactured, and the higher the gearing, the more precise and smooth your tuning experience can be. But your tuning stability is governed by two things only, and that is almost in equal measure, that by the condition of your nut slots is half of it, and the other half is by the amount of slack in your strings that isn't released. Now the first part of it, the nut part of the equation, we've taken care of by getting the nut slots right, in this case by using an adjustable Tusq insert. We've got them the right height so there won't be any detuning or sharp tuning, notes going sharp near the nut. Taken care of that, which was a problem on this guitar. And so the nut's in perfect shape, and it's also made of Tusq, which is a naturally lubricated thing, and it's going to keep it do a lot more towards keeping it in tune. The other part of it, and I'll just explain this before I go ahead and disappear, but the other part of it is the unreleased slack in your strings, and many guitarists are so keen to get on and play that they kind of only give their strings a cursory stretch, and you know, and they think that's about it, and off they go. And sometimes they pull the strings. There's a split fingerboard here. Wow, look at that. That's interesting. There's a split right down there. Wow. Is that actually split? As in, no, it's not coming off, so it is a shard. Has it been glued on? I don't know. There's a little lip. It's not any problem. Ooh, look at that. Wow. And it's just a natural split in the wood, but how about that? So you don't even see that until you clean it up. Those little things. I'm just wondering if it's worth doing anything with that. There's not a lot I can do. It goes underneath this fret, so it's not broken off because it's still attached down here. So it's a natural split, and what it's sort of looking like is, if you cranked it, it might come apart, but it's sort of got a little bit of a gap, but actually probably minimize any impact by just kind of smoothing it down like that. But you can you do anything with it? No, you don't want to push it in or anything, because what you get then is you get cracking on the binding. I mean, it's obviously been stable because it hasn't gone anywhere all this time. That's an interesting little characteristic. What I might just do, just for the sake of this, I think it might be worth seeing, since we've got a gap there, I think it might be worth putting some fill and finish into it. Right? It means we're going to have to do a little bit of cleaning up afterwards on the surface, but I'd rather, if we can help it out, I'd rather we did at this point. So I'm going to get a little bit of fill and finish, which is a great material from a company called Glue Boost, and it's great for actually filling body dents and dings and things. So I'm going to get this, and I'm going to drip it into there and let it go into there. Now we will end up having to wipe some off and get rid of some. Oh, it's sinking right into there. Wow. Holy cow. That is a hungry gap. Cracking an off. That's just soaking it up like nobody's business. Wow. I don't know if this is actually going to keep on soaking in, or whether we're actually ever going to get a sort of reach a fill point. Blimey. I've never seen that before. Is it still going to? Oh no, that could be sort of just about reaching full. Oh no, it's still soaking it up. Oh my god, where's it going? Who knows where it's going? Blimey. That's freaky. Whoa. Interesting little discoveries. So I'm just going to wipe that off there. We're going to need to scrape it to clean it back. I haven't got any more accelerator. I ran out. So, put push it, I can still see it. So you can see there's a little reservoir. I mean, it will billow up. I could leave this for a little while and come back. I think I might want to do that. I'm not in a rush. I'd rather this thing went solid and I don't have the right accelerator. It's going to have to be time based. It does go off in its own time, but it is actually quite a bit better with the accelerator to help it along. I'm just hoping that if I can just get it to go off without soaking the whole thing out. You know, it's still soaking up. Blimey, where's it going? Could be a split all the way under that fingerboard for all I know. Now, one thing I can't know is whether that damn split goes all the way down to the truss rod. That would be a bit of a disaster if it did. Eek! Oh boy. I'm just going to wipe the excess off the top to begin with, because we don't need any great chunks building up. But what I can do is just leave this for a little bit. I don't mind wasting that. We'll leave it for a bit and I'll come back and see if it's set, and then I can just build a bit more on top of it. It'll be just like a solid fix when it's there, but that's interesting to come across that. And it does actually extend a fraction on this side as well, but it's minor. Just a feature of the wood. Look at that. How interesting. Do you think I ought to just check that it's not on this side as well? No, it doesn't go up to there. I mean, you can see the fault in the wood, but it's not split at that point, so I'll leave that where it is. Well, who would have thought of it? Oh, I can't leave it. It's like worrying an itching a scratch, you know what I mean. I'm just kind of thinking, is it going to stop soaking up at some point when we've finally seized the entire truss rod with a reservoir of fill and finish, effectively super glue. Okay, that looks like it's now sitting proud. I'd rather scrape that back and let it all dry in place if that's what it's going to do. It's still trying to soak it up. That's amazing. Wow. I think it is going to finally bottom out in wherever it's soaking to, but that's incredible. Woo-hoo-hoo. So you can see that we can do it carefully and give it a bit of time. This stuff works great when you do have an accelerator solution. You spray it on and it will just turn this into a rock solid finish straight away. But what I'll do is I'll let it set, and then when we come back we'll literally just come back and scrape the wood back, and it's a bit mucky now because that's now soggy, but we'll scrape it back to a nice flush finish, and you won't know, other than the fact that that will be glued solid and it shouldn't split apart. Okay, I'm going to do all of that polishy stuff, and then suddenly I'll be back and we'll be ready to, I'll have oiled the board and we'll be putting some new strings on. And I've saved you from all of that misery. Now, was I saying anything before I interrupted myself? Oh yeah, I was saying about the tuning stability. Right, let me just finish that point while we're at it. Yeah, so the first half is your nut slots. Hugely important, and like I said a bit earlier on, the biggest single transformation you can make to how the guitar plays, both in terms of the feel of the action down here, but also in terms of the ability to stay in tune because of the quality of the nut slots, or the clean running and lack of friction in the nut slots, but also when you get the first fret action right, because you also get rid of those sharp notes played down by the nut, which this guitar, as I mentioned, was definitely suffering from. So huge pound for pound, biggest impact you can have on your guitar if you can only do one thing. But in terms of tuning, the other component in tuning is the amount of slack in your strings. And you'd be astonished, people give me guitars that they've strung up 2 years ago and have played for 2 years, and I can just grab hold of them and pull the thing out of tune with, you know, just by pulling. Now that, when you can do that, that tells you there is still slack in the string, what I call the string train, right, from the tip of one string to the tip of the other end of the string. Whatever it goes over, whether it's bridges, saddles, or wrapped around tuners or whatever. the string train includes the entire length of the string, and if you can pull, if I can pull detune it, pull it to detune it, then what's happened is there is still slack in the string train, and all I've done is just released it by going out of tune. And like I say, people have given me guitars that they thought they've stretched and they thought they'd got the tuning stable, and I can pull it out, pull the strings, and it will go out of tune, and then they'll say, oh yeah, but it still doesn't stay in tune very well actually when I'm playing a lead solo or when I've used a tremolo. And the truth is, that residual slack will kind of release itself bit by bit every time you push a string really hard, every time you hit the tremolo a certain amount, or even when you tune up and you end up with a pressure tension differential either side of the nut because it's catching in the nut as well. So that's one of the detuning, major detuners. But in terms of slack, you basically have to stretch the strings until you cannot detune them manually by pulling on the strings anymore or bending the biggest bends you've ever done, until there is no more possibility of detuning. And you need to keep on doing that until it's stable. And once it is stable, then you can be confident that you've released all the slack in the string train. And once you've released all the slack, then in conjunction with well set nut slots, you will suddenly find that the guitar plays and stays in tune like it never did before, and that's a really fantastic discovery. And I will show you when we come to do it, but I recommend that you spend 15 to 20 minutes when you've restrung it wringing all the slack out of the strings until they are stable, until you can't detune them, because you can't believe how many years later that slack will still release. And people unkindly like to blame the Fender tremolo, for example. They say it won't stay in tune. I'm not using it, I'm locking it down because the tremolo's rubbish. It isn't the tremolo that's rubbish, it's the tremolo doing what it's bound to do, and that is when you use it, the tremolo is helping to release the unreleased slack in your strings, or in your string train, from one end to the other. So once you get that, once you get the nut right, and once you do this string stretching right, and once you set up the tremolo right, which is actually quite easy, relatively easy, then you'll find you can, even the most humble of Stratocasters, budget Strats, can be played with a full floating tremolo without any worry at all. So it's incredible how much the string slack has to do with the tuning stability. But I don't know too many people, until they get it the first time and they realise how great it is to have a guitar that's always in tune when you need it. Until you sort of hit that point, most people just can't convince themselves to put in the time needed, and they just put the strings on, stretch it a couple of times, and then get off and want to play. So I really encourage you, if you were watching one of my videos and it happens to be your guitar I'm working on, and you get it back, and the first impression you get is how fabulously in tune it seems compared to, and how it stays in tune compared to what you remember it, then you've had an experience that should convince you to put in that effort. And if you watch the video, you'll see the time and effort, minimum time and effort required to get it to stay in tune, and hopefully you'll be motivated to do it the same way in future because you've enjoyed the benefits. That's the theory of it. But you could also, if you want to, you can also sort of demo. If you want to prove the point, you can go to or get a friend's guitar. If they're definitely not stretching types, you can get their guitar and you can pull it out of tune, immediately, and they may have been playing it for months, and then they'll say to you, "Oh my God, have I got to get new tuners?" And you'll go, "No, you just need to stretch the slack out of your strings." And then you can show them yourself doing exactly that, and then you can show them from that point onwards it's staying in tune, and you'll be a hero, and world peace will follow, and you'll get a Nobel Peace Prize for services to guitar tuning stability, and you'll be on TV chat shows and people will buy your latest recordings and stuff. It's that significant, I tell you. Anyway, how are we doing? I think we've filled up the hole. Wow. So the reason I filled that hole up, as you can probably tell, is because I don't want it to spring apart while you're playing it. I want to give it the best chance of staying together, because if it comes apart then it's going to break the binding off the fingerboard and all manner of stuff. So I'm going to take a break now, and I'm going to leave this right here, including let that dry, then I'll finish it, cover it up, do all the sanding. See you in a bit. Okay, right. Ooh, so, sorry, hold on. Sorry about the noise. So we have the polished frets, and we have scraped back and tidied up the filled repair there. What am I looking for? Oil. And what am I looking for? Brag. Right. Yeah, so now the time is come to re-oil the fingerboard preparatory to new strings. And here we have a nice rejuvenating oil going on. While I was at it, I also softened down the edges, the ends of these frets with some, I use a kind of composite of, start with 240 grit up and down the edges with a sort of squashed tube of 240 grit paper, followed up by 400 and then 600 and then all the way through the same cycle as the fret sanding process. So softens the fret edges up, because they were feeling a little bit sharp originally, so hopefully that's made them feel a lot nicer. So the fun part now is, let us put upon the guitar its new 10s, Ernie Ball 10s. Oh, it's my nails that I've ruined. Oh, I've ruined my nails. Yeah, new Ernie Ball 10s. And then we'll just, while we're doing that, let the oil sink into the fretboard. Once we've done that, stretch them out and intonate, and we will be ready to hang this, or put it back in its case I should say, for Chris to come and get it tomorrow. And that means I'll be done and won't have to rush tomorrow morning to finish off anything. So it's nice to get it all done in one afternoon stroke evening. As you can see, we are moving into the evening time here. Guess what? It's the old Notting Hill Carnival coming up. Fond memories of that. I used to go fairly regularly. I have had mainly quite a few friends from Trinidad and Tobago, having been born there myself and having lived there a while, different years, but so I've been there a few times with friends in groups, and we've had some fabulous times and some crazy memories, some very mad ones as well. Whoops, you know, ones where, looking back on it, I took really stupid risks. For example, getting stupidly drunk and then kind of losing track of time, commonly known as effectively blacking out, but still staying sort of functional and operating, which is it's a dangerous situation to be in, surrounded by millions of people in a similar sort of various states of repair. Anyway, but I used to love to go to the Notting Hill Carnival, or Carnival as it's called, which really annoys some people. What about the Carnival? No, it's just called Carnival. I've been to a couple of Trinidad and carnivals as well, which I found, I love the music, I love soca and calypso, and for me they were just awesome experiences. Now why is that not fitting in there? Come on, what's going on? Yes, so kind of a part of me sort of thinks, oh, will I go up to Carnival again one day? And I'm kind of, don't know, I'm not sure I would. Difficult part is that I don't drink anymore, or smoke, or do all those wicked things that I once did, and I'm not sure, just I don't know how it would be, frankly. I don't know how I could let go of my inhibitions and self-consciousness, man, and let it all hang out. I don't know, maybe I've got to that age where it wouldn't matter anymore. I kind of wish that were the case, but no, so I don't know. So a bit of me would love to, and a bit of me goes, no, it would be too much of a square. Now, I'm just about to do the wrong thing. Remember what I said to you about putting the middle ones on first? Oh. Let's start with the D and the G. D first, right, so that will cause the nut to stay in place. I pull back 1 fret's length, and then I hold tight, and I lead the held string over the loose string first time round, spin it right round, lift up the loose string and push the held string under the loose string on the second time round, and then you've got a kind of ready-made locking arrangement and a chop. So that sort of gets it nicely held in place for as little extra windings, as few extra windings as possible. So here we go, straight through with G, pull back, hold it with the thumb, hold it tight over the top of the loose one with finger gymnastics, keeping everything under tension. As it comes round, pull up the loose one, direct the held one under the loose one while still keeping the whole game under tension, so that it doesn't spring off the tuner post or come off down at the bridge or something, or get caught up like that. Anyway, it's not too bad. And then we can go for the A and the B and so on. Yes, so yes, sort of bittersweet kind of thing. Oh, a bit of me would like to go up to Carnival. But I don't think I've missed the crush of London at the moment. I think once you get enough rum in your head in Port of Spain, I will remember, you know, the crowd becomes a kind of part of you, the whole music, you know, you become absorbed by the whole thing, and it's, you don't see it as a stressful throng of people. Oh, my experience is if you're nicely out of it, sort of thing. But I suspect if I went up to London, up to a carnival in London, stone cold sober, I might be a bit freaked out by the crush, since I've been kind of living a peaceful rural existence for the last few years. Never know, I'm just theorising. Secret ambition always was to play in the soca band. It's very specific. It's probably a bit limited some ways, although I like the melodic aspect of it, and the lyrical aspect too. Calypso lyrics are great if you like Trinidadian dialect, which I do. Anyway, so that's a kind of hidden secret side of me. Yes, but I do remember in my mid-married years, previous marriage years, when my kids were very small, very irresponsibly kind of dragging my wife and young kids up to carnival, and then one time getting really drunk and basically doing something for about 5 hours while my poor first wife and my kids had to sort of, I don't know, somehow keep me from getting into God knows what trouble or getting locked up or whatever I was liable to get in trouble to get into. But it was a sort of bit of a shameful thing to look back on now. So these are likely to have moved in the meantime, whilst taking the bridge off or moving things around, cleaning things. So there's always a bit of resetting of the action to do. So the first thing I'm going to do is give it a bit of a pull all round, just to bed everything in. And expect quite a bit of slack to be sort of released at this point as well, so you get a real feel of the strings baggying out. But again, a lot of it can be to do with pulling it tight around the posts and so on, so who knows where the slack comes from, but it's definitely there. And then what I'll do is give it a little test tone. Right, so before I do any more stretching, I'm just going to, oh, I hate that G, I might have to adjust that G, it's annoying me so badly. I can do it, but oh, it annoys me. Right, I'm going to just tweakavate this, which is currently now too high, so we can go back to our wicked mean low action. Still too high. Well, we've done all the hard work, we might as well enjoy the fruits of that. Too high. Yeah. So I'm going to give it another pull in this direction, tune it once again, then I'm going to do some other kinds of pulling. Yeah, I can't live with that G the way it is. I'm going to do this, even though I'm not keen on making amendments to somebody's bridge. It's just rubbish. It's horrible. So, having done the first bit of glue from the paper off there, having done the first bit of stretching, now the next thing I'm going to do is stretch it with the thumb and forefinger stretch, which is really quite effective, and you get as much of the remaining slack out of it. What you get to see at this point is, as you're physically wrenching the remaining slack out of the system, you get to see how much it detunes between each go, and it's usually quite surprising how much. And you can I don't know what the word is, you can smugly think to yourself that that would have come out during your playing days had you not stretched it out manually. Now, as you're tuning up, you're listening also for the smoothness of the tuning and any pings. You don't want pings at the nut. You want a linear tuning, which you get with these Tusq nuts usually. Lovely and direct. Feels great. Oh, it really does. I'm so thrilled to be able to do that. Except I hate that. Oh my lord, I hate that. That's grim. will it really know? No, you know what? I'm not going to do it. I'm going to recommend. I don't want to risk it, leaving it in any way rough. I would much rather recommend that Chris buys a roller bridge, and in fact I'll order it for him, and we'll put it on and make sure we just get rid of that. He's not it's not bothered him up till now. I'm not going to do it now. It's an inherent manufacturing, crude manufacturing of that component. You know, tunematic bridge is an abomination of design anyway. Frankly, it just doesn't. It's just a lousy piece of design. Hardly detuning now. See? So we are basically almost in tune, and we would just look to squeeze out the last bit of detuning possible. It's a bit low. Oh god, yeah. Yeah. Okay. Less than 1 millimeter. That's not very clever. We absolutely wouldn't expect it to play at any less than we originally leveled it for. So I've got to make sure I get back to that point. Otherwise, it just won't play. We leveled until right to the action that we wanted it for. That's what we'll play at, but not below. That's cool. That's going over the hill and down the other side. Oh, that's if you ever get that far with the bend. But yeah, that's where we don't often come across it, but that's where the geometry of the curvature of the fret makes it impossible for you to bend it from a low point at the nut up over the hill, down the other side, and back down to a low point over here without the fret in front of it, because of its shape getting in the way of it. It's impossible. So you don't often find it coming into play. I mean, this is an incredibly low action, but you do see it quite often come into play on a 7 1/4 inch radius guitar, like an old vintage Strat or something like that, because they're much tighter radii, and there is a sort of physical limit to how low you can set the action, regardless of what you do to the fret leveling, because of the sheer constraint of the curvature. And you can think of it as trying to push it up and over a hill, or actually pushing it up and over a hill and then expecting the string to clear the fret in front of it, which it can't. It just literally can't do. Go in there, please, my friends. That's still low. Sorry, I'm going to dazzle you for a minute, just get a good look. I'm not getting a very good view with the... I'm still not getting a very good view. Hold on. My old tired eyes are getting in my way. Alright, we're 1.1, that's a bit low still. Thought as much. Okay. 1.5. which is kind of my target, 1.25. It's annoying me, that's still low, that patch. Tune it up again. Sorry about the light. That one is annoying me. It's a low spot. Would you believe it? Yeah, what about that? A low fret. Damn it. Damn it. That could be a high one. Maybe that's a high one. Okay. Just put a mark. Maybe. Let's just double check it. That one there. What I might just do with this one, something I don't often do, but on this one I may just give this a little help because it's marginal. We're at a 12-inch radius. Okay. So don't often do this approach, but it's actually, that one is actually sitting high. It's not a low fret, it's a high one. And I possibly didn't level enough for this low action, but surprising. I didn't notice that on the first run, but hey. Okay, so I'm just going to move these out of the way for a minute. Well, I won't do it that way, will I? Egypt. Right, come on, help me. Thank you. Yes, this is a rather than re-level, which is going to cost a new set of strings and several more hours. I'm going to give this a small encouragement to do what it should do. It's like in the middle, that's sitting slightly proud. So here we go, supported. There goes the nut. Thank you. Okay, it's just that one sticking up, so we'll see how well that worked. And if not, then we'll have to reconsider and see whether a small action tweak is the answer, or whether I'm going to go back through the process all over again. Thank you. It's kind of time consuming and expensive to reuse, or put a new set of strings on, because I don't like to use pre-stressed strings. So let us see. Occasionally that's an effective way of doing it, because the amount of difference is very, very small. It's not the most ideal way of all. like I say, we are dealing with a very low action to begin with, so. Just get it to pitch for a minute. It's improved it considerably. It's almost done. So it's a very small amount. I mean, we're talking tiny differences, and that gets us to where we want to be. Oh, that G's annoying me. Jeez, that's annoying me. Once you take the, if you take the slack the strings off, you always get some more slack back. And in this case, that one still. There's that one there. Yeah, I might just, I'm going to take a look at that one. Much as I don't like to do this, I'm going to take a very careful look. And just go back again. Maybe there. Make sure I got it. So that's that one slightly on the high side, fractionally. I'm going to do that one more time because I think if I do it still on this end, I think we'll be in a better place. But so small, I don't want to waste any fret metal on the other things to chase that one, but it's one of those little kind of compromise scenarios. Do you do it again? Can do. Do we want to do it again? Not sure. There you go. Hold off there. Right, there's our block. This time I'm just going to work on this top edge, 12 radius. There goes the nut. Where did it go? There it is. Right. Okay, we'll see whether that small persuasion has helped. It's a minute difference. Thank you. Morris. See, saved it. That's fine. Just one just sticking its oar into the, or stick into the spokes, shall we say. I'd much rather do it that way than do any more levelling on top of what we've already done, which wasn't much, but I don't want to go backwards and start again. Quite interesting why that didn't show up the first time round. Still, anyway, having said all of that, this is still going to feel like a blindingly low action. Right, last thing to do now is to do the intonation, which can be quite revealing on the Les Paul style guitar, or SG or Les Paul, because it's fitted with the wonderful Tune-o-matic bridge, which ends up needing adjustments beyond what's available on the saddle movement. Now I'm noticing one of these is right at the front, so my worry would be that we're already at the limits of the intonation there. Thank goodness that's on. Flat. Slightly flat. Very slightly flat. So with these bottom three, I'm going to walk them forwards a little bit, just to check the way that's seated. God, they don't. Oh no, I hate this thing. Do you know how much I detest the Tune-o-matic bridge? To get these intonated, I'm going to have to remove the bridge, take out 3 of these, change them round, or at least take out 1 of them and change them round. But for that, I've got to take the bridge off completely to intonate. That's what I despise about. I'm going to do it, even though I'm going to recommend changing this bridge, but I hate the Tune-o-matic bridge for this. So basically, because of the stupidity of the design, which gives you 3 little saddle blocks pointing in one direction and 3 pointing in the other direction for absolutely no good reason other than some stupid design kind of look, stylistic reason, right? There's no practical reason why this works this way. I'm going off the wrong way. So the point is, to get the amount of travel I need to intonate this string, I now have to go take this off and turn at least this one, probably might as well turn the other 2 around as well to keep them all consistent. But there's absolutely no valid reason at all why they start out this way. And there's also no really good reason why they have so little available travel room for intonation available to them anyway. And so now you see we're in this situation where Our nice strings now are getting stressed because we're having to wrench out the bridge. Okay, and now we're going to have to take out this little stupid pin, and we're going to have to pull out this little retainer clip, which is going to try and escape and disappear somewhere into the blue yonder. And once we take out this, and this is sheer sort of physical wrenching now. This thing hasn't got an awful lot of logic to it. You just pull out this thing, which is a bit crudely designed as it is. We've got that problematic G thing here, which we can't really do anything with. So now we have to take out this one, all three of these, and we take out this block, because the shape of this stupid block, for no good reason at all, steals 3mm of adjustment room, and there's precious little in this damn arrangement as it is, so we can't afford to lose that 3mm if we're going to drag this forward where we need it to be, shorter to intonate. So that's the first one, first thing I have to do, and it's so bloody fiddly now. I'm going to be A-ing about trying to get it back in and get it sit down. No, is it in the slot? Is it sitting down? Not very convincingly. And so I want it to come forward, so while I'm at it, I'm going to drag it forward to roughly where I think it's going to need to be, something like that on this one. Then I'm going to do the same to the next one in line. So whichever clever person thought, I know, we'll put 3 facing one way, 3 facing the other, and somebody will go, that's so that the jump off point comes off the front. Well, if that were true, then why are the 3 not in that position with the slopey bit in the wrong side? You know, you can't have the argument both ways, I'm afraid. So there's absolutely no good reason why these things are in 2 sets of opposite directions. It just forces me to have to do this to intonate it, and why the sooner this is thrown in the bin and replaced with a roller bridge that makes more sense, the better. So now we've reclaimed the extra, I can't even get it in here for God's sakes, we've reclaimed the extra intonation room. I want to set these roughly, but they're all ready to fall out on the floor at this point, so you've got to be careful of that. I'm going to line these up. I'm going to follow the spacing of the other side, so I got roughly the same kind of gaps just as a start point, but we'll do it by tuner. Then we put this back in over the top. I think I'm going to write a dissertation one day called Why I Hate the Why I Hate the Tunematic Bridge. Well, look how easy it is to get this even back in. It's not even a straight piece of wire, so it doesn't want to behave in any sensible way. Okay, I've got it over there. Now how do you get it back in this? Oh, you have to bend it and force it in a way that it absolutely doesn't want to go. I see, that's really helpful. Is it likely that all the little saddles are going to come firing out at the same time and spill all over the floor as you cram in this thing that doesn't want to go in this ridiculous angle? Oh look, the other one's come out, that's helpful. Oh look, they're both out now. That's got me nowhere. Let's start from that end. Look, it's spinning round in my hands because it doesn't want to behave, because it's not a straight piece of wire. That's because it's curiously shaped. Now we're going to try and push it this end back into the little hole, but it doesn't want to go that way. Oh look, there it is. But it's at an angle because you've got to get it over the top of this. Push it in and pull it over the top of these little screws. Look, finally. Mr. Gibson, do I need this? I do not. And we very delicately as we possibly can, we drag it back under here with as little damage to the strings as possible, and we cram it back on there. You would never see me fitting a tunematic bridge to any of my SGs, I tell you that. Wrap around pre-compensated bridge, that's what you're getting, and they work brilliantly. Actually, on the most recent one, I tell a slight lie, I put a copy, an American or Chinese, I'd say, copy of a Tone Pros bridge, but again that had massively more intonation travel than any tunematic bridge you've ever seen, and on top of that, it was a much better style. I've got one knocking about here somewhere. Actually, I should have one. There's supposed to be coming some ordered from China. Anyway, but yeah, they're just way better bridges than the tunematic bridge. Okay, I mean, look at the arsing about and stressing these strings now, thanks to the tunematic bridges. Idiosyncrasies. And if you get the impression I don't like them, you'll be absolutely right. Now, having manhandled these strings now for quite some time, I'm going to give them a quick little clean off, because I don't want them getting mucky from all this excitement. I still hate the tunematic bridge more than I could probably tell, although I can try and tell. Let's just get me a reference note. I find that much easier, and then we'll fine tune from there. But so that's their stupid saddle pinging down now. Thank you. We should do that with a G. Get the last bit of slack back out, and then we'll go into the checking the intonation process again. Okay, let's do this grim thing again. Chromatic. Right, bottom three. Good. Tiny bit flat, so I'm going to drag those two a fraction forward and we're done. And that's what I needed that extra space for. So we're right on the front pretty much. Oh, we've got a little bit more on the D if needed be, but that's not ideal. And here we go with the next bit that's so great, the tunematic bridge is so great for. How difficult it is to actually make any adjustments, because guess why? Because the screws are fabulously cleverly perfectly in line with the strings. Who would have thought you might need to get access to them? Good. Hooray. Gotta hit that G. low, very low. Let's do a tiny, tiny weeny tweak on there, if I can even find where I put the wretched tiny, tiny thing. The tiny thing, tiny thing, have you tiny thing, gone tiny thing. Right, so long ago since I saw the tiny thing, I have now lost all physical track of it. Probably pushed under something. Right, I'll have to go and find another tiny thing, because I had the tiny thing, and now it's just down this end somewhere, could be. Oh my goodness. Right, I've got another one here. Anyway, the point was, I was going to make a tiny, tiny adjustment upwards to the first fret action on there. That's good, I'm happy. I can go there until I find the other one. Good, right, that's it. Oh, I don't like that jack socket at all. It's not the best design in the world. Right, that's all. Okay folks, well there you have an odd little set of things all going swimmingly, and then suddenly you hit a couple of weirdies, like first on that one single fractionally high fret, which at the low action got in the way, which posed the problem: do we give up and try it all over again, or do we use a little bit of brute force, which for a single fret is always an option, but it's never a brilliant start point when you're dealing with a whole guitar that you're lowering the entire action on. But for a single fret you can do it. Hence, as a solution, that's what I ended up doing. Then along comes the Tune-o-matic bridge, which turns a turns a simple-ish job into a pain in the butt, and further adds to my reasoning why I would say get shot of it and put a roller bridge on, and if I had one I'd put it straight on. So you know, it's intonated now, courtesy of turning the saddles round, which is an absolute ball's ache. Just sorry my language, but it is a total ball's ache when you're kind of getting near the end and you have to do that, and then you're putting stress, you know, kind of stress on somebody's new strings, which you don't want to have to do, and you have to take the whole bridge apart, and then you have to fiddle with this absolutely dopey thing. It's like an insult to injury from that point onwards, because you put it back together again, it's fiddly, it fights you, you finally get it back together again, and then the last insult to injury is you come to adjust it, and then you remember the worst insult of all, and that is that the adjusters are all directly under strings, which means you barely can turn them without hitting the strings and grinding on the strings as well. So as if it wasn't bad enough, it comes along and laughs in your face. Anyway, I've had enough of it, so don't ever ask me about the Tune-o-matic bridge. But there we go, SG ready. I'll take it indoors. I will be ready for Chris to come and get it, and I never want to see another one again, which is probably kind of why I made my own, because I just wanted to be shot of that. Pretty much every single one of the problems you've seen tonight I've got rid of on mine, including the jack socket, and especially the weight, although this one is a thicker body one and it's actually just about balanced. But then there were other things like the split fingerboard on the edge here. I mean, who would have expected that? But there we go. I will find that damn small hex key if it kills me, but I've got a spare one anyway, so I won't panic. Alright, thanks for watching. Sorry it was a bit of a drawn out thing in the end. I'd hoped it would be quicker, but there we go.